say something out loud right now. It doesn't matter what it is. A single word, a full sentence. Just speak into the empty air and listen to the sound you are producing. Pay attention to the texture of it, the resonance, the warmth, the subtle authority that vibrates behind the syllables. That voice, the one echoing inside your head right now, is the most familiar sound in the entire world to you. It is the audio signature of your consciousness. It is the narrator of your life. You have heard it millions of times, every single day, since the moment you learned how to speak. It feels entirely yours. It feels like the truest representation of who you are. But there is a massive, uncomfortable problem with that voice. It does not exist. The voice you hear when you speak is a biological lie, a complex, multi-layered acoustic hallucination manufactured by your own anatomy. You already know this on some level, even if you try to deny it. Think about the first time you ever heard a recording of yourself. Maybe it was an old home video, a voicemail you accidentally played back, or a voice note on your phone. You pressed play, and what came out of the speaker was jarring. It sounded thin. It sounded nasal, high-pitched, awkward, and completely foreign. Almost everyone has the exact same reaction the first time it happens. A visceral sense of disgust and a desperate need to ask the people around them, is that really what I sound like? And the people around you, the ones who have been listening to you your entire life, just look at you with mild confusion and say, yes, that's exactly what you sound like. In that moment, your brain desperately tries to protect you. You blame the microphone. You blame the cheap speakers on your phone. You tell yourself the audio was compressed, distorted by bad technology. But the technology is not the problem. The microphone didn't distort your voice. The microphone exposed it. The recording is the absolute, unvarnished acoustic truth of your existence in the physical world. It is the voice that your parents hear. It is the voice your friends hear. It is the voice your partner fell in love with. The only person on the face of the earth who has never actually heard your real voice is you. To understand why you are trapped in this bizarre acoustic illusion, we have to look at the hidden mechanics of human hearing. Most people think of hearing as a simple, passive process. A sound happens in the world, it hits your ear, and you hear it. But hearing is not passive. It is a violent, chaotic translation of mechanical energy. When someone else speaks to you, their vocal cords vibrate, which compresses the air molecules in front of them, creating invisible waves of pressure. These waves travel through the empty space of the room, crash into the side of your head, and are funneled by the fleshy outer part of your ear, the pinna down, into your ear canal. At the end of that dark tunnel, the pressure waves slam into the tympanic membrane. Your eardrum, a piece of tissue stretched as tight as the skin of a drum. The eardrum vibrates, transferring that kinetic energy to three of the smallest bones in your body, the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. These bones act as a mechanical amplifier, violently hammering the vibrations into a fluid-filled, snail-shaped organ called the cochlea. Inside the cochlea, microscopic hair cells are bent by the rippling fluid, triggering electrical signals that shoot up the auditory nerve and into your brain. This entire brutal, multi-step mechanical sequence is called air conduction. It is how you hear every single thing in the universe. A car horn, a bird singing, thunder rolling across the sky, and the voices of everyone around you. They all arrive through the air. But when you open your mouth to speak, the rules of physics inside your head change completely. When you talk, you are not just pushing air out of your lungs and through your vocal cords to create sound waves in the room. You are essentially detonating a small acoustic event at the dead center of your own skull. Your vocal cords are housed in your larynx, which is anchored deep within your neck, surrounded by a dense architecture of muscle, cartilage, fluid, and heavy bone. As your vocal cords vibrate to produce speech, those vibrations don't just go out of your mouth. They also go backward and upward, violently shaking the entire physical structure of your head. They travel through the soft tissues of your neck, up through your jawbone, and directly into the thick, heavy plates of your cranium. This brings us to the first hidden mechanism of the illusion: bone conduction. The bones in your skull are exceptionally good at transmitting low-frequency vibrations. Think about what happens when you stand next to a massive speaker at a concert. You don't just hear the bass. You feel it in your chest, in your ribs, in the soles of your feet. Solid objects transmit low frequencies with devastating efficiency. Your skull does the exact same thing to your own voice. As you speak, the deep, bass-heavy frequencies of your vocal cords bypass the outer ear entirely, and vibrate directly through the bone of your skull straight into the fluid of the cochlea. So, when you hear yourself speak, you are actually hearing two completely different audio feeds mixed together in real time. You are hearing the air-conducted sound, the sound that comes out of your mouth, travels around your cheek, and goes into your ear like normal. But you are simultaneously hearing the bone-conducted sound, the deep, internal earthquake rattling through your skull. And your skull acts as a massive, biological low-pass filter. It strips away the high, reedy, nasal frequencies and significantly boosts the deep, warm, resonant bass frequencies. This internal bass boost makes your voice sound richer, deeper, more authoritative, and more musical to you than it actually is. You have spent your entire life listening to yourself through a custom-built, heavy bone equalizer that exists solely to flatter you. When you hear a recording of yourself, that internal bone-conducted bass track is entirely stripped away. You are suddenly forced to listen to the thin, raw, unfiltered air-conducted track. You are hearing yourself the way the rest of the universe hears you, stripped of your biological armor, and your brain instantly rejects it as foreign. The shock of this realization is not a modern phenomenon. For the vast majority of human history, from the moment Homo sapiens first started grunting in the African savanna 300,000 years ago, no human being had ever heard their true voice. Kings, emperors, philosophers, peasants, billions of people lived and died trapped inside their own acoustic illusions. It wasn't until the year 1877 that the illusion was finally shattered. That was the year Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, the first machine capable of recording and reproducing sound. Before the phonograph, sound was ephemeral. It existed for a fraction of a second, and then vanished into the air forever. Edison figured out how to capture it, using a vibrating stylus to carve the physical waves of sound into a rotating cylinder of tinfoil. When he first demonstrated the device, people were terrified. But the true psychological horror began when people were invited to speak into the machine, and then listen to the playback. Historical accounts from the late 19th century are filled with stories of people experiencing profound psychological distress when hearing the phonograph. People accused Edison of ventriloquism. They thought it was a trick. They insisted the machine was defective, that it was maliciously distorting their voices to make them sound foolish, weak, and shrill. The dissonance between the rich, booming voice they knew in their heads and the thin, tinny reality carved into the foil was too much for the human ego to process. It was the first time in evolutionary history that the mirror of sound was held up to humanity, and humanity hated what it saw. But the physical density of your skull is only the first layer of this illusion. If bone conduction was the only thing happening, it would just be a quirk of physics. But evolution rarely stops at physics. It always goes deeper, into the wet, electrical wiring of the brain itself. Because as it turns out, the discrepancy between your internal voice and your external voice is not an accident. It is a highly engineered, active suppression system. Every single time you open your mouth to speak, your brain does something deeply manipulative. Just milliseconds before your vocal cords actually vibrate, the motor cortex of your brain, the part responsible for sending the command to your muscles to move, fires off a secondary, duplicate signal. In neurology, this is called an efference copy, or corollary discharge. This signal is sent directly to your auditory cortex, the part of your brain responsible for processing sound. The message is incredibly specific. It essentially tells your auditory cortex, "Hey, We are about to make a noise. It's going to happen right now, and it's going to be loud. Turn down the volume. Your brain actively, physically dampens your hearing the exact moment you speak. It turns down the gain on your auditory processing. This is called sensory attenuation. It is the exact same neurological mechanism that makes it physically impossible for you to tickle yourself. If someone else touches your ribs, your brain registers as a surprising external stimulus, and you laugh and squirm. But if you try to tickle yourself, your motor cortex sends an efference copy to your sensory cortex, predicting the exact location, timing, and pressure of your own fingers. Your brain knows the touch is coming, so it mutes the sensory response. There is no surprise, so there is no tickle. Your voice operates on the exact same principle, but with profound consequences. Because your mouth is located just a few inches away from your ears, your voice is incredibly loud. If you were forced to process the raw, unfiltered volume of your own shouting, singing, or even normal speaking without any neurological dampening, it would be deafening. It would overwhelm your auditory system, making it impossible to hear anything else in your environment. And in the brutal, unforgiving environment of early human evolution, being deaf to your surroundings was a death sentence. If you are loudly communicating with your tribe, you still absolutely need to hear the subtle snap of a twig behind you, the low growl of a predator in the brush, or the warning cry of someone further away. If your own voice masked those sounds, you would be eaten. So, evolution designed a workaround, a ruthless, highly efficient noise-canceling system built directly into your neural pathways. You are literally biologically programmed to ignore yourself. You are deaf to your own true output. The voice you hear is a heavily suppressed, heavily edited, physically muted version of reality, heavily overlaid with the bone-shaking bass of your own skull. You are a sensory black hole to your own existence. This hidden mechanism of sensory attenuation is so deeply fundamental to human sanity that when it breaks, the mind collapses. In neurotypical individuals, the corollary discharge perfectly matches the intention to speak with the actual sound produced, confirming ownership of the voice. I decided to speak. I hear the speech, therefore, this is my voice. But what happens when that system misfires? What happens when the motor cortex generates inner speech, the silent thoughts, racing through your head, but fails to send the efference copy to the auditory cortex, to claim ownership of those thoughts? The auditory cortex suddenly receives the signal of speech, but it has no warning that the speech was generated internally. Without that warning, the brain assumes the sound must be coming from the outside. It assumes someone else is talking. This catastrophic failure of sensory attenuation is one of the leading neurological explanations for auditory hallucinations in schizophrenia. When people hear voices that aren't there, they are often hearing the unfiltered, unclaimed echoes of their own internal monologue, terrifyingly transformed into the voices of strangers, demons, or gods, simply because a microscopic electrical warning signal failed to fire. The only thing separating your quiet internal thoughts from a terrifying auditory hallucination is a tiny, silent message your brain sends to itself millions of times a day. When you pull all of this together, the physical reality of air conduction, the heavy bass filter of your own skeleton, the historical shock of early recording technology, and the active, aggressive neurological muting of your own sensory processing, a deeply unsettling picture begins to form. We place so much weight on our voices. We use them to express love, to declare war, to soothe children, to assert our identities. We think we know ourselves based on the sound that resonates in our heads when we are alone. But that sound is a phantom. It is a biological compromise, an evolutionary band-aid designed to stop us from deafening ourselves while we try to survive in a hostile world. You have spent years agonizing over the exact tone you used in an argument. You have spent hours practicing a speech, trying to get the perfect pitch, the perfect cadence, believing you have fine-tuned your delivery. But the delivery you heard was a private performance, broadcast exclusively inside the closed, fleshy theater of your own cranium. The people you argued with, the people you apologized to, the people you confessed your deepest secrets to, they heard a completely different person. They heard a voice that lacked the deep, resonant armor you thought you were projecting. They heard the fragile, thin, absolute truth of you. We walk through the world completely isolated within our own biology. Every human being is trapped in a bespoke acoustic reality that nobody else can ever visit. The voice that forms the absolute core of your identity, the sound that you consider to be you, is a physical impossibility anywhere outside of your own skull. So the next time you speak, the next time you clear your throat or laugh or whisper to someone in the dark, remember what is actually happening. You are entirely alone with that sound. You are the only entity in the known universe experiencing that specific acoustic hallucination. And the real you, the one echoing out into the cold air for everyone else to hear, is a complete and utter stranger.